Hello and welcome to the Let's Play of Might and Magic Book 2, Gates to Another World. This is going to be an odd episode in which we just read the manual. If you don't want to hear a reading of the manual, please skip to episode 3. In this, we're just going to be going over some of the lore, uh, and not reading the entire manual, mostly just the story part. I would suggest to you to read this on your own. But if you like audiobooks or just want to hear this and you're ongoing, this might be a time to do that. I also will not be including background music in this because YouTube has pretty harsh algorithms on that. But if you would like, I really suggest some Might and Magic, 3 music. It's really good background listening music. But without further ado, let's begin. Might and Magic 2, Gates to Another World. A fantasy role-playing simulation by John von Conaghan. Prologue. An account of Korak the Mysterious' unsettling disappearance as told by his apprentice, Gwendon the Young. Korak was the guy that we found in the inn who was the ghost. So right as we were leaving, he popped in front of us and said, "Hey, you're about to go on this great adventure." Korak has always held many dire secrets, but recently he had shown signs of being outwardly distressed. This troubled me greatly, as what could disturb one so powerful and composed as Korak the Mysterious? Was he not only high priest as well as being regarded by all as a most accomplished warrior, and being the most powerful archmage other than King Cologne the Vanquished? He was all that the knowledgeable strive to be and what the ignorant claim to be. Korak used to tell me stories of different, wondrous worlds with hideous monsters and mighty warriors. He once even mentioned that he came from another world. I thought his stories were mere fables or myths meant to entertain me. Little did I know that he spoke the truth, and that a problem would arise from this truth that would drive him mad. One day, while I was working on translations of a sorcerer's scroll, Korak burst into the library with a harried look on his brow. He told me of an alien criminal from another reality who had escaped into our beloved Kron. Korak then promptly forgot that I was present and proceeded to curse and mumble profusely as he searched through the books for some lost text which contained a gleaming of information which might help him expel the dangerous alien. Being insatiably curious, I attempted to eavesdrop on the conversation he was having with himself. He spoke of Kron being out of alignment with other worlds, of a highly destructive alien being named Sheltum, and of an anointed champion who could realign Kron before a horrific wave of fiery destruction would sweep across and destroy the land. After his foray in the library, Korak acted quite strangely during the next few days. He would lock himself up in his private study for hours at a time. Frightful noises emanated from behind the locked door, and then, suddenly, he would stop. He would emerge changed each time in a subtle fashion. He would enter the study after devouring almost an entire banquet by himself, and exit with an appetite as if he had not eaten in days. Other times he would wan and pale from long hours of intensive research done in the library. He would then go to the study and exit in a few hours with a tan as if he had just returned from Murray's Resort Isle, basking in the sun there for a week. This weird behavior continued for almost a fortnight. One day he left his study after an unusually long session and immediately started screaming about the end of the world and how he could not stop it. Amazingly, he was covered in snow, and yet it was midsummer. He then looked about in desperation and withdrew a strange four-taloned claw which I had never seen before. Korak then uttered a spell which caused a blinding glow of sheer power to envelope his body. He was terrible to behold, bathed in an eerie shower of what must have been pure ethereal energy, just standing there, exulting in his new-found might. Seconds later, a clap of thunder shook the building and Korak was gone. I believe that he transported himself away in order to stop the mystifying doom which lay upon Kron. Unfortunately, I have my doubts. Maybe the spell of power was too much for Korak the Mysterious and he brought about his own destruction. I do not know anything for sure. After all, I am now only an apprentice without a master to tell me if I am right or wrong. A week later, Lord Pinehurst visited and went into Korak's study. The strange, eerie noises started again, and Lord Pinehurst was gone. I entered the study and noticed that one of Korak's machines was missing. Next day, I received a sealed letter delivered by a special courier from Lord Pinehurst. He wrote that he was fine, not to worry, and that I should travel to Castle Pinehurst to continue my studies. I go now and hope that this growing chaos in my life will soon end. Alright, so that was the prologue, and now we're going to read History of Kron. This being a synopsis of the histories of Kron as gathered by Korak the Mysterious and found in his study in the Luxus Palace Royale by Gwendon the Young. I, Korak called the Mysterious, have gathered these histories of the world, aptly called Kron, through personal experiences gained by the use of a magical artifact which allows travel through the very fabric of time itself. At first, there was only void, yet in the nothing something arose. An ethereal substance capable of supporting life came into existence. From the time of this forming shall I, as do all in Kron, reckon time. The shaping of this etherealness took well nigh 1 century to occur and develop into recognizable form. Next, water and vast elements came from disorder and remained to mix with the ether. Strange beings arose out of this chaotic union. Elemental lords of great power warred for control of the waters. The greatest of these was powerful Aqualander, mightiest and most majestic of all the water kings. Preternatural fierceness combined with uncanny intelligence allowed him to hold unquestionable dominion over all of the other elementals. He reigned supreme for 60 and a generation of years. Then turmoil erupted. Potent creatures from an unknown mystical land charged into Kron with conquest of the brutal water lords as their goal. A battle which would last centuries began. Aqualander and his minions were taken by surprise, and the strange beings gained a foothold which they would not release. Puzzlement and fear of the unknown swept through the ranks of the normally stolid water elementals. Who were these warriors who suddenly came from nowhere? They were the spirits of air come from afar to expand their empire. Their lord was terrible indeed, a creature of tumultuous air named Shawwind, who could call upon tremendous legions of vicious air elementals to blow back the shocked water lords. Air fought with water for over a century, until reaching a level of equilibrium which neither side could change. Seeking to upset the deadlock and gain the momentum in the war against the air elementals, Aqualander charged his servitors to create an ultimate weapon. He received much more than he wanted. His vassals summoned forth incredibly powerful creatures of destruction that would remain under the Waterlord's total dominance. Fire elementals were issued forth. These hateful monsters' sole purpose in life was to destroy, and at destruction their like will never be approached. They sucked the life out of the air spirits without mercy, forcing them to endure a slow, consuming burn until there was nothing left. However, the Fire Lords were few in number and could not totally destroy the Masters of the Wind. The leader of the burning horde, Pyronast, Master of Flame, disliked the iron-fisted rule of Aqualander and the Water Lords. Any hesitation of a fire elemental in carrying out an order issued by a water lord would result in extinguishment. Pyronast waited, for he was patient, and even though he and his vassals chafed under the rule of the water elementals, they hated Shawwind and the air elementals even more. 80 years of servitude and war passed for the Fire Lords until Pyronast deemed the time proper for rebellion against Aqualander. Wanting only to escape servitude while still being able to crush the ranks of the despised Shawwind, the Master of Flame attempted to break away peacefully from the air elementals. At first they succeeded, but resentment and overconfidence built up in the legions of water. Are not the fire elementals our servants, brought forth by us to serve our heeds? Can we not crush them as we crush the masters of the winds? This the armies of Aqualander thought, forgetting that the might of the air horde must be fought once again without aid. Also forgetting that in order to extinguish a fire elemental, a water lord loses much of himself in the struggle that ensues. Shrewd Aqualander realized that the water lords could not hope to end victorious in a war against both the air and the fire elementals. However, his counsel fell upon deaf ears. What good is the voice of reason to an angry mob? For 50 years, water fought air and fire fought water and air fought fire and water. Battles were bloodthirsty, and allies were non existent. Kron had transformed into a chaotic battlefield with no one group able to assert itself over the others. And then came disaster. From places vaguely rumored to exist came the most fearsome creatures yet. Emperors of Earth they called themselves. They were led by Grugtar the Cruel. In one fell stroke they invaded Kron and caused the petty struggles between water, air, and fire to come to an utter halt. Ancient enemies were forced to unite for survival against the new common enemy. At first, the earth elementals appeared invulnerable. 80 years and innumerable battles later, a method was found to stop them. Aqualander and the Water Lords would soak the earth elementals with a flood of water. Then, Pyronast and the Fire Lords would bake the dissipated creatures into dry silt. Finally, Shallwind and the air spirits would lift the silt into the sky and spread all the particles across the world, leaving the earth elemental utterly eradicated. Alas, the effort by the three elemental tribes was too late to stop Grugtar the Cruel and the Emperors of Earth. They had pulled together and formed a giant mass of earthen matter which floated upon water, was immune to fire, and which would not scatter as leaves upon the wind. For 20 more years, the elementals attempted to overcome the earthen landmass of Grugtar the Cruel. They failed miserably, and the Emperors of Earth assumed command of what would become Kron. By the year 500, Grugtar and the Earth Elementals were busily constructing a fixed land area with the toil of their slaves. For almost 100 years, all of the elementals, water, air, fire, and earth, struggled to perfect the landmass. What they came up with is what we know as the physical land of Kron. Rumor of Kron spread to other worlds somehow, and an inexorable flow of what were to the elementals small, pitiful creatures began to populate the world of Grugtar in the 7th century. The creatures were of many different humanoid types, but they all had basic similarities and resistances which enabled them to survive in Kron. Water beaded off them, air swirled past them, fire did burn them, but only under extremes, and mighty earth they trode upon. The humanoids were able to extract properties from each of the 4 elements' features and use it for their own benefit. But, perhaps most important of all, they could weave magic. At first, there were a few of these pathetic creatures, but they multiplied rapidly and spread across the landmass. The humanoids strengthened after years of toil and pain. Ambitions grew, and they attempted to make Kron their own. This aroused the attention of Grugtar the Cruel and forced him into action. Unfortunately for the elementals, Grugtar acted too late. The humanoids had been in Kron for over 70 years and had acclimated themselves to all the difficulties which the elementals could produce. They had weapons and spells which could immobilize all but the most powerful elemental lords. Grugtar did not realize this and made a most fatal error. He attacked. He marshaled his forces for the obliteration of the feeble humanoids. The humanoids knew what to expect and lay a trap for the elemental forces. All of the most powerful spellcasters gathered on the Isle of the Ancients and combined their efforts to create an orb of power. This orb had a mystical receptacle, a 4-taloned claw. There was a talon for each elemental force, and alone that talon could control the elemental creatures it represented. The 4 talons could be combined to form a holder for the orb. This formed a weapon of incomparable power which would guarantee the complete submission or destruction of any and all elemental creatures. Many tests were made in order to perfect this weapon. Gross mutilations and horrible deaths were the result of most of these. In the latter part of the 8th century, there was a human male weak in magic but strong in courage named Kalon who tested the orb and survived unmolested. Many humanoids died before this because of Gralkor's attack and the testing of the orb. Cologne resolved to end it all immediately. He went to the tallest mountain in all of Kron alone. He then challenged the 4 elemental lords to do battle. Much damage to the land followed, including a transformation of the mountain into the crater we know as the Dead Zone. Cologne, armed with the orange glowing orb, emerged victorious and then banished each of the 4 elemental tribes to a separate corner of Kron, and formed barriers to keep them imprisoned. Within each elemental zone, he placed the corresponding talon of the mighty claw in the order of the elementals' appearance: water, air, fire, and earth. He kept the orb for himself. With the elemental forces banished from direct interaction with the humanoids of Kron, civilization evolved and everyone prospered. Cologne gained much magic power due to his battle with the elementals and his frequent use of the orb. He became King Cologne the Conjurer and ruled wisely for 30 or more years. Peace spread about through the land. Education began of the young and living conditions improved. Communities formed and trade developed. People were happy and content. Then, in the mid-9th century, the elementals struck back. Unable to physically enter Kron and maddened at the elementals' defeat at the hand of a single puny human, Aqualander studied that which defeated him: magic. He had a great aptitude for sorcery and learned quickly by studying the humanoids who ventured near his realm. He gained particular skill in forming and summoning. Using this skill, Aqualander formed a fell creature of enormous girth and power. He filled it with life from many of his followers and endowed it with the most fearsome of weapons known to him: fire. He had created the first dragon, a creature of mindless destruction and incredible strength. This dragon was formed just outside of the water barrier and left Aqualander with the intent to destroy Cologne and then Kron. King Cologne the Conjurer sensed the dragon's creation and the threat it posed. He sought it out to vanquish it and quell the elemental lords forever. He met the dark creature in the beautiful savanna of plenty. Unfortunately, as mighty as he was, Cologne had only the power of the now faintly glowing orb with him, and perished after a disappointingly quick battle. The dragon breathed barrels of flame and engulfed Cologne entirely, consuming him in a bath of fiery death. Cologne had attempted to cast a spell which would form a shield of water to protect himself, but the spell was changed as a last-minute surge of power from the orb went through Cologne's body and caused a flood to ravage the savannah. For all the might of the dragon, he could not fly without wings and was too heavy to swim. He died a slow death, powerless against the natural habitat of his master. After effects of the battle were numerous and disastrous. The Savannah of Plenty was destroyed and became the Quagmire of Doom, an area of great evil. However, it is rumored that the orb still exists somewhere in the Quagmire, though no one has ever found it. Dragons entered Kron through once closed corridors and wreaked havoc among the populace. Princess Lomanda, Cologne's daughter, assumed a tentative command of the land. All of these factors led to regression and the ultimate downfall of the level of civilization which had been achieved. Now it is the 10th century and chaos reigns. Swords and sorcery have replaced law and order as the way of life. Monsters roam the lands of Kron freely and do as they please. Isolated areas hold out against barbarism but are doomed to fall. All that remains of Kron's glorious past are old wives' tale of mighty warriors and wizards doing battle against evil hordes of a tragic lord, King Cologne the Vanquished. Okay, and that concludes our reading of some of the manual's story, and as you can see, we've got the table of contents here. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. Looks like there's just some commands here. Probably has some spells, character classes, and races. Something I saw too was that you could actually like be a ninja in this game, so that's kind of cool. There's some spells in here, and there doesn't really seem to be that much more of the story here. So, without holding anything up, next episode we're going to be walking around and exploring the world, maybe do some encounters, and continue the adventure. Until next time, bye-bye.